The following books, stories, plays, poems, or limericks you will hear on Right Time Radio are the intellectual property of the writers and authors mentioned. Any copying, recording, or reproduction of this work is strictly prohibited without the express written consent of the author. The content of this show is the individual expression of the author and does not necessarily reflect the views of the owner of this radio station.
Time for Right Time Radio. And I'm Lynn Donovan.
Oh, no, you're not.
Well, Tom, welcome to Right Time Radio.
Thank you, Lynn. How are you today?
Awesome, as always.
I think we're confused. We just
decided y'all are just being silly.
We just decided to pull something off on Carrie.
It's Friday. It's okay.
Yes, but I am excited about our guest today.
I am too. My favorite author, David Lynn Spencer, is here.
Hi, I'm happy to be here today, Tom and Lynn.
Thank you.
Are you confused too? Do you know which one of us is which?
I think I have it figured out. We have 2 point of view characters, so.
That's the truth. Boy, howdy. Listen, hey, Tom, let me tell you something about David Lynn.
Please do.
All right.
Well, first of all, she's been on our show before.
She has. We love having her on our show. And we're going to have her on again, so we'll talk about that later.
Just once so far. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So she is a wife and mother of a professional rodeo bullfighters. David Lynn Spencer writes inspirational Western romance. She has taught composition and creative writing at Pueblo Community College and served as a columnist and reporter for the Canyon City Daily Record. She has countless nonfiction pieces published in Pro Rodeo, Sports News, American Cowboy Magazine, Western Horseman Magazine, The Upper Room, Power for Living, The Quiet Hour, The Christian Standard, and other periodicals. She is an ECPA and Publishers Weekly best-selling novelist and winner of the Will Rogers Gold Medallion for Inspirational Western Fiction. She's also fairly certain that her previous career as a rodeo journalist and award-winning crime beat reporter prepared her for life along Colorado's front range, wrangling Blue, the cow dog, and mouse detectors, Annie and Oakley. You can connect with her at davidlynnspencer.com. Welcome, David Lynn.
It's nice to be here.
And David Lynn, you're going to read from a novel that you just published, a week ago?
That's correct. Yes, September 3rd.
All right, so while they're reading, they can go look it up on Amazon. And
Mail order Misfire.
Yeah, mail order Misfire.
Yep, available on Amazon.
All right, let's please go ahead and begin.
Prologue, Locked in Colorado, 1879. Gracie slid a thin sheet of paper from the top drawer of her papa's desk and held her breath, listening for his steps on the porch. It would take him only a little while to finish chores, but she had already memorized what she wanted to say. Perching on the edge of his desk chair, she unstopped the inkwell and dipped his pen, taking pains not to drip on the leather-cornered blotter. Carefully, she penned her plea. What did the hymn say? The one they'd sung yesterday at church. Blessed be the tie that binds, each other's burdens bear. That was it. Since Mama died, Papa didn't have anyone to bear his burden other than Gracie herself, and if she understood the words to that song as she believed she did, then God wanted her Papa to have a helper. She signed his name and addressed an envelope to the pastor in Independence who had married her parents. Then she ran to her room and hid the letter beneath her pillow. When Papa went to work tomorrow and she went to school, she'd stop by the mercantile and slip the letter into the storekeeper's mail pouch. Peeking through her lacy curtains, she let loose a whisper. Oh, Lord, I pray this ain't lying I'm about to do. But my Papa needs a tie that binds his heart up. It's been hurting for such a long time. She smoothed her pillow and quilt, then took all her 9 years of knowledge to the kitchen and made biscuits for supper, confident that the Lord heard her prayer. She'd been taught to believe such things since she could remember. Why, just yesterday, the preacher's words had stirred through her heart, telling her to have faith, to trust God. And she believed those words, especially since the preacher was her papa.
This is Right Time Radio, and we will take a little commercial break here, and we'll be back with more of Mail Order Misfire by David Lynn Spencer.
That's good and beautiful in the world, it's still broken and suffering under a curse. Dr. Michael Ziegler tells what God has done, is doing, and will do to set things right again. Hear how the curse of God fell upon the Son of God for you this week on The Lutheran Hour.
The Lutheran Hour is brought to you by St. John's Lutheran Church in Canyon City. Listen Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. here on 1400 KRLN.
Tune in weekdays to AM 1400 in the 4 o'clock hour for the Senior Minute. Useful whether you're a senior or not. These minute segments are meant to improve your life and lifestyle. Messages range from health and wellness to practical and positive solutions. All brought to you each week by Skyline Ridge Nursing and Rehabilitation. Getting to know and treat each senior individually and independently as possible. Call for more information at 275-0665.
KRLN weather, sunny and a little warmer today. South winds at 10 this afternoon. The high today around 83. Mostly clear tonight, the low near 51. Sunny and hot tomorrow, the high around 90. 45 was our low this morning after a high of 82 yesterday. 67 degrees now at the weather station.
Talk Radio 1400, KRLN.
This is Right Time Radio, and we are back with more of Mail Order Misfire. But first, we're going to take a little side trip, and Tom is going to read the blurb for this book.
This book is book 2 in the Thanksgiving Books and Blessing collection, and it's the prequel for the Front Range Bride series. Mail Order Misfire is the one that exposes the heart of a widowed lawman when he meets the bride his 9-year-old daughter wrote for without telling him. Preacher Bern Stidham is a peacemaker when he's not carrying one on his hip. His little girl Gracie wants a helper for her preacher sheriff, papa, and a mama for herself. So she writes their former pastor in Missouri asking for a mail order bride. Recently widowed dressmaker Etta Collier is a half step ahead of the banker who carries a lustful eye for her, as well as the note on her home. When her pastor receives a letter from little Gracie Stidham, he sees a solution for everyone's problem and encourages Etta to answer Gracie's request. So here we go with the rest.
A little bit more, Mr. Tom.
So running from one man's lecherous pursuit into the home of another's she knows nothing about, Etta Collier risks everything to ease a little girl's loneliness and perhaps find a second chance at love.
There we go. And now for Chapter 1.
Independence, Missouri, 1880. Chapter 1. Etta Collier flinched at the first shovelful of dirt to hit William's coffin. It scratched against the rough pine as it did her soul, dry and devoid of hope. A wintry gust whipped the hilltop cemetery and snatched at the woolen cloak she clutched so tightly that her fingers ached. Hunching her shoulders, she attempted to cover her exposed ears. The black lace scarf that held her hat to her head was no barrier to the cutting cold. A smooth voice muttered behind her, Clerk Penholder, the banker so appropriately named. She felt his lecherous eyes on her, his intentions unhindered by her mourning dress. The man had been closing in on her for days, just as he'd closed in on William's note, one slithering step at a time. God help her, she'd run if she could. turn her back on this town, let the bank foreclose on the house, and go where? Poor William had not been wise in money matters, and in his efforts to wipe out his debts, he had foolishly lost what little they had at the gambling tables. The note on their modest home not far from his blacksmith shop grew heavier and heavier until the bar brawler's bullet dropped William like a hammer on his anvil. Then the note fell squarely on Etta's shoulders. She flinched again as dirt flew against the coffin, filling the hole in the ground, but not the hole in her heart. Mrs. Collier. Her hackles rose at the sound of her name on Penholder's lips. Uninvited, he moved in close beside her, too close, watching William's grave grow shallower. If I may, during your time of such great need, please allow me to be of service. The reek of old cigar smoke pinched her nose, and she made no effort to mask her disgust. The man held her future in his tight grip, and she resented it. Revulsion weighted her words. That will not be necessary. He tugged at his flapping sack coat, unable to button it over his indulgences. We shall see another more feasible time, perhaps. We shall do nothing of the sort. He nodded once and lifted his bowler as he left, holding it tightly against the wind. She gripped her embroidered hanky like William had gripped his forging tongs. Her skills as a seamstress would have to suffice for the time being, and perhaps she could take in a boarder for the upstairs room, one with sterling recommendations, of course, preferably another woman alone, a widow like herself. The word felt misplaced. Not yet 30, she was too young to be widowed. Mentally, she assessed the few unmarried men of appropriate age in town, feeling almost adulterous at such thoughts. Was there no one who could take William's place? Clark Penholder's face rose like an apparition, and she shuddered. She'd go to the poorhouse before she'd let him one step further into her life. Biting back tears, she ducked her head against the dirt blown from each shovelful, waiting until it mounded above William and everyone had gone. Then she knelt at the edge of the grave, one gloved hand upon it, and bid William farewell. In spite of his carelessness, he had loved her in his own way. He had tried to provide for her. At last, tears overtook her will, drying as quickly as they fell, robbed by the blustery wind of the chance to warm her cold cheeks. She and William had talked of children, but none came. They'd talked of better days, but none came. They'd talked of getting out from under Penholder's thumb, but the banker remained, and William had gone on without her. Her fingers dug into the loose soil, searching for a stronghold. Lord, give me direction. Show me what to do, where to go, for I loathe staying here to be stalked like prey. She squeezed her eyes shut against winter's harsh breath, pushing more tears through her lashes and into oblivion. 3 months later, a bright spring day poured through the parlor window onto Etta's tiny stitches that bound the bodice of Leslie Mae McClintock's wedding dress. At the prick of her needle, Etta jerked her hand, and a red bead formed on her finger. Heaven forbid she stain the pale blue satin. How careless to let her mind wander while she worked on her last order. If Leslie Mae was pleased with her work, perhaps others would seek out Etta's talents, and she could scrape together enough for the next month's note payment. A knock at the door brought her up tight and tense, a common condition since William's funeral. If she didn't find calm in her circumstances, she would be taking the same tiny stitches in her morning dress, for already the black bombazine hung more loosely on her frame than before. Carefully laying the wedding dress over her chair, she sucked the last bit of blood from her finger and smoothed her skirt. Who would call so soon after breakfast? The back of Pastor Fillmore's balding head appeared through the door glass as she stood facing the street in front of her house. At Etta's turn of the doorknob, he turned as well. Good morning, Mrs. Collier. I do hope I'm not disturbing you too early on this fine day. She stepped back, opening the door wider for the cheerful man who, she had heard, enjoyed his share of more of cakes and pastries. She had neither. "Not at all, Pastor. Please come in. Would you like a cup of tea? Perhaps coffee?" In the parlor, he took the chair diagonal to hers at the small occasional table in the corner. "Coffee, if you've already a pot, but no trouble, please." When she returned with tea for herself and coffee for her guest, he was studying the blue ground. "Leslie May's wedding dress," she said. "Indeed." He accepted the cup she offered and glanced at the saucer as if looking for a cookie. "You do fine work." He checked again. "And I have that on good authority from my wife, I might add." Etta nodded her thanks and sat down, curiosity chewing through her middle over why the pastor was calling. No doubt it had nothing to do with Mrs. Fillmore's modest wardrobe or Leslie May's pending nuptials. After a sip, he set his cup and saucer on the table and drew a letter from inside his frock coat. "Please forgive my forwardness in light of William's recent homegoing, but this inquiry came to me early last fall, and ever since William's service, you have come to mind each time I've run across it in my desk." He held out the folded paper. Etta stared at it as if it were a snake coiled to strike. "Another debt of William's?" He inched it closer. "If you don't mind, I'd like you to read it while I wait so we can discuss it." More moneylenders or creditors? She could not bear another burden, regardless how small or insignificant. Mindful of the slight tremor in her hand, she took the letter and quickly pressed it against her lap. "If this is another of William's financial indiscretions, I simply can't—" "Please, Mrs. Collier." The pastor leaned forward in his chair, compassion softening his features. "Just read it." She set her teacup and saucer aside and unfolded the thin paper. Uneven script, almost juvenile in its lack of refinement, covered the sheet. At her glance, Pastor Fillmore nodded, then rested against a chair back with his coffee in hand, prepared to wait for her perusal. Lockton, Colorado, October 1879. Dear Pastor Fillmore, I hope this letter finds you and your wife well since me and Gracie and Ruth left. Ruth went to heaven some 3 years past. Gracie fares well, as does the small congregation I serve temporary, being the sheriff and all, but my heart grows weary to bear my burdens alone. Would there be a kind and helpful mother-type woman in your church willing to come to Colorado and help me? Like the mail-order brides who join other men here at the Rocky Mountains. God bless you for your help. Please write back to Gracie and send to the general store. Sheriff Burns Stidham. The pastor's eyes fairly danced in anticipation of Etta's opinion, and she accommodated him. This does not read like a letter penned by any man, whether educated clergyman or desperate sheriff. The pastor chuckled and ran a hand over his smooth crown. Burns Stidham is indeed a different sort, but my guess is his daughter wrote the letter. She was about 5 when the family moved west. Should be 9 or so by now. Etta looked again at the careful words, several misspelled and sentences bereft of proper punctuation. Her mind raced. Why did this request bring me to your mind? Pastor Fillmore sat up and peered into her soul as only a man of the cloth could. You are newly widowed, and I understand that my mention of such things to you is improper, to say the least. So forgive me, Mrs. Collier, but you need a husband, for I see the way Clark Penholder watches you. He paused for effect, as he did in his sermons before driving home a point. He watches you like a hawk watches a sparrow. A tremor ran through her at the bold statement, whether from the truth of the good man's words or the fact that her situation was so obvious to others. May I speak plainly, Harriet? As if he'd not done so already. Though she disliked her given name, Etta folded her hands to keep them still and nodded her consent. I know Burns Stidham to be a fine, upstanding man, one who is willing to serve the Lockton residents as sheriff and, evidently, as interim pastor, until a full-time minister can be found. He pointed to the letter beneath Etta's hand. He and his wife, Ruth, were members of my congregation, as the letter alludes. I married them more than a decade ago, before you and William, rest his soul, moved here. Their daughter Grace appears to be sensitive to the burdens her father carries, and by my guess, she's looking for a mother's love herself. I can think of no one better suited for the two of them than you. His eyes smiled first, and then the rest of his face. And they for you. Pastor Fillmore leaned back, clearing the space between them for Etta to fill it with her own words. She had none.
You're listening to Mail Order Misfire by David Lynn Spencer, written and read by David Lynn, and we'll be right back.
It's defined as a multifaceted response to loss, particularly the loss of someone or something that has died. Grief can be overwhelming, but you don't have to struggle alone. There are healthy ways to cope and to learn to heal. Fremont Regional Hospice offers grief support services that are free and open to the community. To find out more about our grief support, come by 1439 Main Street in Canyon City or call 275-4315. Fremont Regional Hospice is proud to be your hometown hospice.
Royal Gorge Radio's AM 1400 KRLN and Star Country 104.5 FM. And we, along with Fremont and Royal Gorge area businesses, proudly present our Customer Appreciation Day we call Money Day.
Hey y'all, this is Chelsea Lynn inviting you to join me every Tuesday afternoon at 2:30 for your chance to win your share of free money.
That's right, a little cold hard cash could be yours. To win, simply be registered and present at one of these Money Day store locations.
High Country Bank, 150 North Reynolds Avenue. Mountain Wookiees, 1426 Royal Gorge Boulevard. And Waterhole number 1, 1532 Elm Avenue, Canyon City.
So visit a Money Day store location, pick up a registration card, fill it out and get it back to Royal Gorge Radio. Or go online at royalgorgeradio.com to find out more. Then every Tuesday afternoon at 2:30, be at a Money Day store location. Listen for your name, hear your name, and call 276-0331 within 60 seconds to claim your cash. From Fremont County and Royal Gorge area businesses, AM 1400 KRLN and Star Country 104.5.
This is Dean from Brady's Garden and Spa, your local garden guy for all things garden. Brady's carries everything for garden, including trees, shrubs, perennial flowers, fountains, statuaries, and pond supplies. Brady's also has a large selection of houseplants, fertilizers, pottery, and quality potting soils. Local problems, local solutions. Don't forget, we also carry quality hot tubs from American Whirlpool and a complete line of water care products from Leisure Time. Don't forget to tune in to 1400 Carol N this Thursday at 9 a.m. for the Garden Guy Garden Show with Dean Brady.
What are you going to do while you're here in Fremont County? There's so much to choose from. Visit a winery. Check out some real Wild West history. Hike along the Riverwalk. Go camping, glamping, or stay a while at one of our bed and breakfasts. How about a zip line tour, a helicopter tour, river rafting on some of the best rapids in the country, or fly fishing along our gold medal stretch of the Arkansas River? Just some suggestions from 8 Mile Bar and Grill and Echo Canyon camping, glamping, and rafting tours.
We are back with more of Right Time Radio. You can tune in every Friday at 10 o'clock to hear us. And we would also like to thank Fremont Regional Hospice for sponsoring our show. Thank you so much, people over there. Now, for more of Mail Order Misfire by David Lynn Spencer.
Chapter 2. Bern Stidham lifted the pail and poured warm milk into glass jars on the counter, covered them with cheesecloth, then set them aside to let the cream rise. Old Lizzie could provide for a family of 4 as well as her calf, and she would be if Ruth and the baby hadn't passed on, leaving him and Gracie behind. His gut twisted along that old switchback trail he'd ridden too many times in the last few years. Seemed longer, yet still like yesterday, that Ruth's sweet voice welcomed him home of an evening. Lord, would he never mend? Papa, can you help me with this knot? He looked at Gracie, sitting at the kitchen table stitching up a doll dress that Buster had ripped. Fool pup was jealous of the dog, so now he whined at the end of a tether out back till he grew some manners. I'll wash out the pail, then I'll have a look. Gracie let out an exaggerated sigh. Oh, if we just had someone to help us, things would be so much easier. You wouldn't have to be sheriff all day and milk Lizzie and help me sew. She threw a quick underbrow glance his way that worried him. Ain't that right, Papa? Isn't, Gracie, isn't that right? Well, isn't it? He chuckled, sat down next to her at the table, and reached for the needle and thread knotted to the doll's dress. I don't mind, and we do pretty well for ourselves, I'd say. He didn't like stretching the truth, telling Grace he didn't mind when he minded something fierce. But he couldn't let on that he was lonely or things would be worse than they were. He and Gracie had already tolerated an unhealthy number of Sunday chicken dinners pushed upon them by well-meaning spinsters and mothers of marriageable daughters. He'd nearly run out of kind remarks and refusals that wouldn't chase off what few parishioners there were. If he could just wrangle up a real preacher to take over, that would simplify things 100-fold. He'd sent letters to Pastor Fillmore in Independence, Pastor Bittman in Olin Springs, and several other churches in Colorado, but no one had come in response to his inquiries for a full-time preacher. Maybe they knew offering plate pickings were slim. Small town, smaller congregation. The circuit preacher stopped in every couple of months, but from Burns' position behind his sheriff's badge, he knew the town needed a man behind the pulpit as well. He just never figured he'd be carrying both ends of the equation. As long as he was supposing, maybe he should run an advertisement in the big city newspapers. Wanted. Mail order minister. Huh. Are you laughing at me and my sewing, Papa? Gracie's big brown eyes puddled up and threatened to spill over. He set the doll aside and pulled his daughter close. No, darling, I'm not laughing at you. I was thinking about another matter while wrestling with this bona fide knot you've worked into your thread. You're a fine seamstress, but sometimes things just get tangled up in a way we didn't intend them to. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. See what I mean? We need somebody to help us. Mama would want that, don't you think? Wasn't the first time Gracie made him think. She'd mentioned their need for a help more often in the last year. She didn't remember her mother in the same way he did, nor miss her with the same deep sense of loss. But it wouldn't be long and she'd be asking womanly questions he couldn't answer. As things stood now, he didn't even know who he could ask for help other than Doc Hepner, and that'd be a terrible thing to do to his own daughter. But he'd be hog-tied before he approached one of the women at church. He wouldn't do that to Gracie either. Frustrated with the knot in his life, as well as the one in Gracie's thread, he tied off the strand, cut it loose close to the fabric, and handed her the doll. Now rethread your needle and you can start over right next to where you left off. The words pained him. Should he do the same? Cut his cords of grief and tie them off and start over? Find someone to help, as Gracie put it? Her little arms flew around his neck and she kissed him on the cheek. Thank you, Papa. Do you want me to make fresh biscuits for supper? What he wanted was for his little girl to be a little girl, not the woman of the house. We have plenty left over from this morning, Gracie. You just set the table for us and I'll dish up the beans. She didn't hide the wrinkle on her nose at his mention of beans, but she did what he asked. Setting the table was what Ruth would have Gracie do. He didn't care what side of the bowl his spoon was on or whether he had a napkin, just so he could eat. But that was no way to raise a girl who would someday be a mother and wife in her own right. And that day would be here before he knew it. Later that night, he lay awake in his bed and listened to frogs singing down at the creek. Come summer, crickets would be joining the choir, and he'd be halfway through another year of loneliness. He loved Gracie more than his own life, and he thanked the Lord for her every day, but he was heart-sore for a partner, a wife, someone fashioned for him like Eve was for Adam. He believed he'd found that woman in Ruth, and it had taken a long time before he could face the Lord about her passing and not hold a grudge against him. Taking on Sunday services after old preacher Thorndike retired had driven Byrne back to his faith, and he was glad. Life was emptier when a man parted ways with God. But might the Lord have someone to fill the earthly void in Byrne's and Gracie's days? He considered every single woman in Lockton, but they all came with an overly eager mother. He didn't think he could handle that many females in his life at once. Putting word out to a few of the nearest towns qualified as advertising for a mail-order bride, didn't it? Shoot, if he was going to do that, he might as well write back east. Trouble was, his mail-order bride efforts would probably be as successful as his mail-order preacher pursuit. From his side of the bed, he reached out to where Ruth used to lie close beside him. Lord, is there someone out there for Gracie and me? If you've got a woman fashioned to fit us, please open my eyes and show me how to tie off the first thread and start over. Etta did not deem herself rude or unseemly, but on occasion she rose to the challenge, particularly where Mr. Penholder was concerned. If he did not take her rebuffs to heart and stop calling on her, she would serve him a strychnine-laced cup of tea the next time he darkened her door. She paused in her bread kneading, giving remorse opportunity to rise in her heart. It did not. With a hearty punch to the doughy mound, she repented anyway. Sometimes one had to act without waiting for feelings to attend the deed. The idea sat down at the back of her mind, folded its arms, and tapped an annoying foot on her thoughts. One had to act without waiting for feelings to attend the deed. Could that be her answer? Could the letter from Byrne Stidham's daughter be her direction? At William's graveside, Etta had asked for the Lord's guidance, yet no signs had shown themselves until Pastor Fillmore's visit last week. He'd left the letter with her, and she'd read it over and over, looking for any hint of leading. Maybe it was so obvious she didn't see it. Discomfort wiggled through as she recalled the pastor's candid remark about hawks and sparrows. She refused to be the pitiful bird in Penholder's talons. But wasn't becoming a mail-order bride a rather drastic move? One that was, well, beneath her. She leaned to the side for a glimpse of what truly lay beneath her, and all she saw was the worn kitchen hardwood of a home she was bound to lose if she stayed in Independence. Her dressmaking provided barely enough money to keep body and soul together. If she answered the letter and traveled to Lockton, Colorado, wherever that was, she had the chance for a fresh start. A risky start, but a new beginning nonetheless. And she would not be a mail-order bride in the strictest sense of the word. She'd not advertised her virtues in the newspaper, seeking some lice-ridden miner or lonely farmer with whom to set up housekeeping. Shuddering, she rubbed her arms against an inner chill. No, she would merely answer the heartfelt letter of a child intent on the welfare of her father, a man regarded by Pastor Fillmore as upstanding and honest. Unique, perhaps, in his double-edged occupation of gun-toting preacher, but evidently loved by his daughter. That should speak for the man, shouldn't it? She punched down the dough and turned it into a greased bowl, covering it to rise a second time. After washing and drying her hands, she went to the secretary in the parlor where she sat down with paper and pen. Dear Mr. Stidham. The words on the page appeared more formidable than they had in her mind. She wadded the paper and started over. Dear Gracie. Once more, Etta took out the child's letter and read the closing that asked Pastor Fillmore to write to Gracie in care of the general store. Should he write the reply? No. Etta would write her own letter and simply explain that he had given it to her. She was inclined to reveal the little girl's ruse and tell her that Pastor Fillmore and she had seen right through it. But was that necessary? She dipped the pen and continued. Pastor Fillmore gave me your letter and asked that a reply be sent to you. He explained your and your father's situation to me and suggested that I might be someone who could meet your family's needs. I am planning to visit you in Lockton. Perhaps we can get to know each other and see where things go from there. I will be on the train arriving in Olin Springs on Friday, May 10th, 3 weeks from today. Kindest regards, Etta Collier. Etta left the letter to dry and paced the parlor, wringing her hands to keep them from trembling. In light of Penholder's advances, her dwindling finances, and the heart-tugging plea of a young girl, not to mention her pastor's counsel, Etta had gone so far as to check the train schedule and the price of a ticket. She had just enough money to reach the town nearest Lockton. But then what? Daylight dimmed as a shadow passed in front of the parlor window. Clark Penholder. She hurried to the secretary, folded the letter, and addressed an envelope as an impatient knock jarred her teeth and her nerves. If she didn't leave Independence behind, she might very well end up in jail for poisoning the banker.
Well done, David Lynn.
Yes, that's a great cliffhanger.
And that's where we're ending, so we need to tell people where they can get this.
Let's go to commercial and then tell them when we get back.
Oh, man. What if they're not there?
They'll stay.
Okay.
It's too exciting. So this is Right Time Radio, and we will be right back after these commercials.
People often ask me how you pick a good realtor. Well, you ask other people. And the only thing you should want to hear is, my realtor made it easy. Oftentimes, people will want a babysitter. I can do that. Often people want to know who would move them. I can do that. Oftentimes, they'll call them, they're hungry. They want a pizza. I can help them do that. I can tell you where to go. So that's how personal we get. And that's the way we want it. And that's really how we do business at Coldwell Banker Fremont Realty.
We interrupt this broadcast to inform area listeners to be on the lookout for a vigilante. Eyewitnesses state he has removed or blocked hundreds, if not thousands, of computer infections and problems. Known as the Randy Man of Absolute Computer Repair, locals have spotted him around the county, but frequents 621 Main Street in Canyon City, inside Absolute Accounting. If you need his vigilante services to get your computer or laptop running smoothly again, call 315-6333. Remember, the Randy Man can, because he fixes it with care and makes it run like new.
I didn't want to talk. She just sat with me. That was all I really needed.
We got back. One day he called me out of the blue, and it's comforting to know that I always can count on him to have my back.
She called me from time to time. I really didn't think I needed any help.
It took me from being really depressed to feeling like somebody cared. It gave me some hope. Just that one text.
Be there. Your call, your presence, your words, your support. Be there and help save a life. Learn more about preventing suicide at veteranscrisisline.net.
KRLN weather, sunny and a bit warmer today. South winds at 10 this afternoon. High today around 83. Mostly clear tonight with a low near 51. Then sunny and hot tomorrow. West winds at 10. Tomorrow's high around 90. 82 was our high yesterday. Our low this morning dropped down to 45. Currently 71 degrees at the Weather Center.
Talk Radio 1400 KRLN.
We're back with Right Time Radio every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Hey, we bring you an hour of old-time radio with news stories. We have drama, short stories, poems, and excerpts from local authors' books. It's a local show, so we've got local authors, local stories, and of course local voice actors. So sometimes they're based on the truth, and sometimes they're based on our imagination, and they're always entertaining, and that sure was the case today. Thanks.
Yes, it was.
Dave Lynn, I know we said thanked you before, but you did a great job with this.
Yes.
Lots
Thank you.
of great
I
metaphors.
love your voice, and I love your writing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I need people to love my writing, or no one will buy my books.
And then we can't do what we love to do,
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, where can we get this? You left us at a great stopping point, I guess. Kind of hanging, if these guys are going to get together.
I can't wait till they meet,
Oh, it's pretty exciting when they meet. You can find the book on Amazon. I have an Amazon author's book page that lists all my books, but mail order Misfire is on there, free on Kindle Unlimited, $2.99.
Cool.
Otherwise, and it's not yet in print form.
And are there links on your website to those?
Yes.
What's your website?
My website is my name, DavaLynnSpencer.com.
Let's spell it out a little.
DAVALYNN Spencer, or David Adam Victor Adam Lincoln Young Nora. That's a throwback from my reporter days when I was listening on the scanner and they spelled things. I knew what they were saying.
You would have done it different in the Air Force, but...
Yes, you had a different alphabet.
Yeah.
Yes. But I do have a page for each book, and there's a little prequel, little prelude for each book. You know, they can read a sample. And then it links right to where they can purchase the book.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Cool.
And that one being that good, I go to DavaLynnSpencer.com and check out all her books. But
So is this book part of a series or something that'll come down the road later?
Yes, this is a prequel to my Front Range Brides series. And it's also book 2 in a collection of Thanksgiving books called Thanksgiving Books and Blessings. Nice. So it's a double hitter. It's killing two birds with one stone.
There you go. And then it'll be in paperback next year?
Next year, yes.
All right, very good. Because I want one so I can get her signature.
I do have book plates that I send to readers if they order a print book offline and want me to sign it. Then I can mail them a book plate that I have signed, and they can put it in the inside of the front cover.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, what else have you got coming up? I know you're always writing, so.
Well, I'm working with cover designers and editors right now on my Christmas novella, which will release November 1st, and it's titled Just in Time for Christmas.
Neat.
It's also set in the high country around here, in Divide, or what my imagination has incorporated as Divide.
Yeah. So that's the town is Divide?
Yes.
That's cool.
And what year?
In the 1875. This one is a little earlier. And so I've taken literary license in making Divide a bit more of a town than it was in 1875.
Right. We've been known to do that, haven't we?
Sure. We created a whole town out of it.
We did.
Yes, Lockton in this book I just read a portion of. That's my fictional town, Lockton.
Yeah, it's easier than using a real name because then people criticize you for not getting the stores in the right place.
Exactly.
It's fiction.
If you enjoyed David Lynn, you're going to have to keep tuning in to Right Time Radio because she will be back on October 4th. She'll be back and she's going to be reading An Unexpected Redemption, and that's out of one of these series too.
It's from this same series, Front Range Brides. It's book 2 of the series.
I can't wait to hear that one. Okay, so Tom, we have a announcement with our series that you and I are working on.
This is just to increase the anticipation of our the readers we anticipate.
Yes, that is what this is. Well, we had announced that it was going to be launched on October 1, but because we are perfectionists, we are going to have to put it off a little bit.
3 weeks.
Not far. 3 weeks.
It'll be October 22nd that we release Beyond the Veil, and the first one will be like a prologue book.
Yes.
It'll be short, maybe 6,000 to 10,000 words, somewhere in there. I can't remember exactly. And due to circumstances entirely within our control, we're going to delay that release. So we're gonna have a little party over at Papa's sometime too. So
we are. So we'll be letting you guys know about that. But we're gonna have like a book release party at the Papa's Pizza.
Yeah,
that's gonna be a lot of fun.
We'll have at least 2 out of the 5 authors. The other three authors that are in our series are spread across the country, but one of them might come out.
Yeah,
she's
rumor has it that one of our authors is going to come.
Cole.
Yes, from Detroit, Michigan.
And there might be some Parker J. Cole fans out there because she is quite the popular romance author.
She is.
But Beyond the Veil, if you don't remember from previous episodes of Right Time Radio, It is a mashup of many different genres, romance, fantasy, sci-fi, and now I think a little comedy, too. But
well, we can't help that.
yeah, and Britt Mooney, who goes by MB Mooney, as a
comedic writer.
Yes, he has got. We were just reading his, which is not scheduled to be released at the same time, but a little later. So anyway, the Beyond the Veil book, October 21st, and then every 3 weeks thereafter, we're going to release another one.
That's right. Clear into next year.
That sounds very ambitious to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Well, we've got 2 of the books written, but not finalized.
Technically 3, if you count the prologue book. Yeah.
And then there's 3 more that are still in the works.
Right behind that.
Yeah, and those aren't ours. So we're
but they're good.
Like
We've been seeing bits and pieces of it. And then Tom and I are going to write 2 more in that round, and I think Parker's going to write 1 more. So there'll be like, what is that, 8?
7 or 8, yeah.
7 or 8 total. So, yeah, it's going to be a good series.
Yeah,
really interesting.
sci-fi creatures come from another world to ours, and they mess with people's love affairs.
Yes, instead of lions and tigers and bears, it's going to be fairies and cyclops and golems and shades.
Yeah, my creature's a shade, and he is an emotion manipulating phantasm.
Need another M there.
you heard an excerpt from it already.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go back to Dave Lynn. Wait. We can't give that part away. Okay. Sorry, there's some more exciting news about Dave Lynn, but
we will when we can.
When in October, we can probably
stay tuned.
Yeah,
we will reveal when we can.
Okay, but we can talk about that. There, Kaleidoscope is featuring local authors lately.
Yeah, we talked to Kaleidoscope last week, which if everybody knows, there's a First Friday thing downtown.
It's on Main and 6th.
Well,
at the
Kaleidoscope is Main and 6th.
At the Cell House.
But the whole downtown does this. It's the First Friday thing. I don't know what the other word is, but it's called #TogetherWeGrow. And all of the businesses are working together to help each other. And in that spirit, we talk to them. And every first Friday of the month, they're going to have a featured author. So we said, hey, let's have that featured author on our show. And then they'll be there that morning. And then that afternoon, I think 5 to 7. Is that correct, Tom? They will have their feature author of the month, which will be the exact same person. So you can hear there's an excerpt of their story here on Right Time Radio, then go to the Kaleidoscope and buy their book and get their signature and meet them and all of that good stuff. Plus all the other amazing stuff at Kaleidoscope. I bought some jalapeno jam, and my husband is eating it every morning, so it's all going to be gone before long. But yeah, they've got some amazing stuff.
Okay, we didn't get back to Dave Lynn, though.
Let's get back to David Lynn. We've got like 7 minutes to talk to her.
I do have a question for you, because I really did enjoy this excerpt that you gave, and I liked you worked in some beautiful metaphors and some nice literary devices of repeating things and then changing it up a little bit. I really enjoyed all the writing. It was just very smooth.
Thank you.
So the question I have is, if you got advice for new writers or writers that are maybe not so new but they want to improve their writing, what's the thing that you felt, and this is a hard question, so I'm trying to give you some time to think about it, what that gave you, that moved your writing forward the most? Any advice, like, we hear a lot of times about eliminating passive voice. Do you have an answer yet? Because I'll let, okay, I was just delaying to give you time to think, but go ahead. What moved your writing forward?
Well, I teach writing workshops, and this is often a question that I address. Aside from studying the craft, which I think we never stop doing, you know,
Absolutely.
like a musician never stops practicing and playing. Besides studying the craft, I find reading good writing is probably the most encouraging. Seeing how someone else strung the words together, seeing the little knack they have at describing an emotion or a visceral moment. The reader wants to experience some type of emotion. They either want to cry or laugh or be angry or sigh. You know, they want the satisfaction of the genre they have chosen, and they choose genres specifically.
Nice.
So I find that reading good writing is probably the easiest, the smoothest way to improve your own writing. At least it is for me.
Do you find yourself reading somebody's book and going, oh, that is so good, and you actually write it down somewhere so that you've got it for later, or do you highlight in the book?
Yes, and yes.
Yes? Okay.
I do both.
Yeah, I get it.
I have notebooks, sticky notes. You know, sticky notes are one of God's great gifts to the world. That and chocolate truffles. Yes.
Amen.
Yes, I mark up a book, and if I give someone my copies, you know, I have to apologize beforehand because
they're marked.
I have inked them up.
Well, here's another question you may or may not have to think about. Do you have a favorite author that you like the way they write and you get a lot from? That it maybe helps inspire you and you go, oh, I want to sit down and write.
For different genres, yes. For different styles, yes. I like Tamara Alexander very much. I like the way she...
romance?
Yes, she writes historical romance.
Writing that down.
Tamara Alexander. I also like Joanne Bischoff, Bischoff. She wrote a book titled The Lady in the Lion Heart. Magnificent book. I think that was a 2018 book. Another author is Laura France. Laura, as in Laura, France. I like her writing. I also like the writing of Frank Peretti.
Oh, yeah.
I've read him.
Yeah.
Ted Decker.
Yep.
Oh,
I agree.
He was the speaker for the conference I went to a couple years ago.
Yes. Randy Ingermanson.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned him earlier.
I like him very much.
And what genre? Frank writes like a spiritual warfare kind of books.
Yes.
What does Randy write?
Randy writes almost science fiction, but not exactly.
Okay.
Kind of a genre bend. Huh?
Yeah, he's written biblical historical fiction, which is extremely gripping. He has a series called the City of God trilogy that takes the reader from the present day, through a portal. I don't want to give away anything. And they end up in first century Israel, first century Jerusalem.
I think I've heard of that series.
Yeah. It's amazing because the gal shows up and she's wearing cutoffs and a tank top. And it's,
oh my,
you know, it's like, yeah.
It would be for their time.
And they think she's a streetwalker.
Right.
And she's an archaeologist.
Not even a good one.
Yeah, and she's an archaeologist. So
cool.
So it's hard to describe, but his books are definitely worth reading.
Thank you for all that. I wrote every one of those down.
Yeah, me too. And if you want to hear what we wrote down,
yes,
you can join us on Right Time Radio. Well, why don't you give that name?
It'll be this afternoon, but it's Right Time Radio. That's WRITE Time Radio .my-free.website.
All right. Thanks for joining us all. We'll talk to you next week on Right Time Radio at 10 o'clock.
See you later.